Hello there. Tonight we sleep where a sensible bed would immediately resign, on the open boards of a Viking ship, with snow blowing low across the sea and the hull lifting under you like a living thing with cold ribs. A rope near your hand has frozen into a rough curve. A shield rim knocks once, then again, each time the ship falls into the dark water. There is no cabin waiting below, no bunk, no helpful little curtain, and, just to make the matter plain, you probably won't survive this with your elegance intact. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me where you're watching from and what the local time is, because somewhere out there, someone is listening under a blanket while pretending this is character building. Now dim the lights and let the idea of a bedroom drift away behind the stern. The first lesson is not cold. Cold will have its turn. The first lesson is that the ship does not make room for you as a sleeper. It makes room for you as weight, labour, and risk. Your body is counted among oars, chests, sailcloth, weapons, food bundles, spare rope, and the wet knees of other men who all seem to have been arranged by someone with a grudge against elbows. You lower yourself beside a sea chest and discover that lying down is not one action, it is a negotiation. The chest takes one side of your back. A coil of rope claims the space where your shoulder would like to go. Someone's boot sits exactly where your foot should rest, and the owner of the boot is either asleep or pretending to be, which is a powerful legal position at sea. You fold your knees closer. The ship lifts. The chest nudges your spine as if correcting your optimism. The vessel itself is built for speed, reach, and shallow water, not for private rest. Viking Age ships are famously clinker-built, with overlapping planks fastened so the hull can stay light, strong, and flexible. That construction helps the ship move through rough water without behaving like a dead box. It also means the boards beneath you never feel like a floor that has agreed to stay still. They answer the wave, they answer the weight of cargo, they answer the steering oar. Your hip receives all these messages with very little scholarly enthusiasm. There may be benches, but benches are not beds. They are places for rowing, bracing, sitting, climbing over, and bruising the shin in darkness. A rowing thwart gives shape to the crew's work, not mercy to the crew's spine. If you try to curl beneath or beside one, it immediately introduces you to the corner of a chest, the shaft of an oar, and the fact that wool bunches badly when trapped under a freezing thigh. The men around you know this without discussing it. Sleep comes in fractions of deck, a narrow strip between cargo and hull, a hollow under the slant of bundled sailcloth, a place where one knee can wedge against a barrel without rolling into the next man's ribs. There is no generous arrangement, only the least offensive one currently available. The ship does not offer comfort. It offers positions that remain possible for a while. A hand reaches over you to move a small bundle farther inward. The bundle lands near your hip with a dull, damp sound. It might be spare clothing. It might be someone's wrapped tools. It might be personal treasure, if personal treasure has learned to smell faintly of wet leather and old fish. On a deck like this, every object is more than itself. A chest becomes a wall. A rope becomes a border. A folded cloak becomes a claim. A bundle becomes the thing you must not kick unless you wish to make enemies in a very small country. That country has rules. Not written rules, not announced with dignity, but rules all the same. A man of higher rank, greater age, better skill, or stronger claim may take the drier side of a chest. A newcomer learns the wet edges first. A man needed at the steering oar may have space kept open for movement, even while others sleep in knots. A careless sleeper who blocks the path to the bailer will be moved, and not with poetry. The ship teaches status through knees, shoulders, and who gets stepped over gently. The surviving evidence refuses to settle the question of exactly how sleeping places were assigned or improvised on every kind of Viking Age voyage. Hulls, fittings, ship burials, cargo traces, saga accounts and experimental sailing can take us close, but the actual nightly arrangement of tired bodies leaves almost nothing behind. A plank remembers a rivet, It does not remember whose cloak was allowed near the chest. So you live inside practical uncertainty, where archaeology gives the shape of the vessel and your aching hip supplies the rest. The snow makes the deck feel smaller. It erases distance beyond the gunwale and pulls the world inward until the whole sea seems made of near objects. A leather strap, a sleeve crusted white, a shield boss dull with ice, a wooden cup tucked under someone's arm, a rope end stiffened like a dead eel. In clear daylight, a longship can look elegant, even proud. In a sub-zero blizzard, it becomes a narrow wooden argument against drowning. A shield leans near your shoulder. It is not displayed grandly along the rail now, it is simply in the way, and because it is in the way, it also blocks a slice of wind. Round shields are among the most recognisable objects of the Viking Age, but here the shield's glory has been demoted into weather management. Its rim presses into a coil of rope. Its face, once painted or plain, keeps snow from blowing directly into the gap beside your neck. This is a fine reminder that heroic equipment often spends much of life performing unheroic tasks. Your own sleeping territory is no wider than the reach of one careful arm. You place your palm against the chest, not because it is comfortable, but because it gives you a fixed edge. The ship rolls, your fingers tighten, the chest holds. For now, that is enough to make it feel almost trustworthy. A person can become loyal to very little at sea. Nearby, someone shifts under a cloak and steals half your shelter with one sleepy movement. You could object. You do not. Objections use breath, and breath is warm. Instead, you tuck your knees closer and slide your shoulder under the shield's shadow. The shield knocks lightly against the hull. The sound travels through the wood and into your jaw. No one says good night. That would imply agreement. Sleep here does not begin with permission. It begins when the body gives up asking for better terms. A cheek rests on a folded sleeve. A hand stays hooked near a rope. A knee braces against cargo. One boot remains findable. The other is hopefully still attached. Somewhere forward, a man coughs into wool. Somewhere aft, the steering oar creaks against its fastening. Your eyes close for 3 breaths. The deck shifts under you. They open again. This is how rest starts on a Viking ship in winter. Not as surrender, but as a series of small reductions. You reduce the space you occupy. You reduce the number of complaints worth making. You reduce your idea of warmth to one fold of cloak that has not yet become wet. You reduce the world to chest, rope, shield, plank, breath, and the cold shape of another man's shoulder beside yours. The sea keeps working beneath the hull. Snow keeps searching for gaps. The ship carries crew, cargo, pride, fear, and not a single true bedroom. You keep one hand on the chest, curl your body into the narrow permission left between objects, and learn, slowly, how little room a human being needs when the rest belongs to the storm. The hand on the chest remains there after your eyes close, because a fixed edge is better than trust. Around that edge, your body begins arranging the poor equipment of sleep, a cloak pulled high, a sleeve folded under the cheek, a strip of hide dragged toward the hip before someone else's knee traps it forever. Nothing is laid out, nothing is neat. You do not make a bed so much as you gather a few reluctant materials and persuade them to fail more slowly. The cloak is the chief negotiator. It has already been clothing, rain cover, windbreak, bundle wrap, and a private wall for thoughts you do not say aloud. Now it must become bedding as well. You pull one side across your chest, tuck the lower hem under your knees, and trap a fold between your back and the sea chest. The cloth resists because it is damp along one edge and stiff along another. Wool is patient, but it is not obedient. Wool matters more than almost anything soft aboard. Across the Norse world, sheep and wool textiles are central to daily life, and a good cloak holds hours of labour in every thread: shearing, washing, combing, spinning, weaving, fulling, cutting, sewing, wearing, mending, and wearing again. That fact is not decorative tonight, it is lying across your ribs. The work of many hands becomes the one layer between your breathing body and the snow that keeps trying to enter at the collar. You turn the dryer side inward by feel. This is harder than it sounds because the cloak has no clear moral centre anymore. One patch has caught spray, one patch has been warmed by your shoulder, one patch smells of tarred rope, one patch may be dry or only less wet, which at sea is close enough to hope. You choose by touch, pressing the cloth against your cheek, rejecting the colder fold, finding a warmer fold, then losing it when the ship tilts. A hide lies partly under the man beside you. He has claimed it without ceremony by falling asleep on it first. Its free edge is thick and hard with cold, but you manage to drag a handspan of it beneath your hip. That handspan changes everything, and almost nothing. The plank still presses upward, the chill still rises, but the bone no longer rests directly against wet wood, and in this narrow economy, that counts as wealth. A blanket, if one can call it that, is pushed toward you from somewhere near the barrel. It may not be yours. It may not be anyone's in particular now. Ownership becomes complicated when survival flattens social theory. You take only enough to cover your thigh. A man's hand appears from under a cloak and pulls the far end back, not angrily, just firmly. The blanket becomes a border treaty. You both accept the terms. The written sources leave room for disagreement about what ordinary sailors carried for sleeping on different Viking Age journeys. A wealthy traveller, a hired rower, a raiding crewman, and a trader's helper do not bring the same bundle aboard. A short coastal run, a long crossing, a military voyage, and a migration with goods and family gear change the answer again. Archaeology preserves ships, tools, textile fragments and fittings, but a night's bedding is usually too worn, too reused, too perishable, and too humble to survive as a tidy inventory. History can recover a sword more easily than a damp blanket under somebody's knee. So you live in the practical middle. You have what a person can wear, fold, borrow, wedge, and keep from blowing away. A cloak, perhaps a hide, maybe a second layer of wool, a spare tunic, a piece of sailcloth if no one more powerful needs it. The bedroll is not a romantic travel kit unfastened beside a quiet fire. It is a cluster of decisions made while crouching on boards that refuse to stay level. A small leather bag is open near your feet. The man who owns it does not open it wide. He shields the contents from snow with his body and removes a wad of dry plant fibre wrapped inside cloth. Moss, tow, wool scraps or some other soft packing, whatever it is, it has been kept dry with care that borders on affection. He presses a little of it inside a fold near his ear, making the smallest cushion in the northern world. It looks ridiculous. It also looks brilliant. That is the odd truth of bedding here. Softness is temporary and often accidental. A rope coil is soft until it freezes. A folded sleeve is soft until the arm needs it. A spare tunic is soft until somebody spills bilge water across it. Even a handful of dry fibre becomes a luxury object if it keeps one cheek from resting on a knot. Comfort is not a category. It is a brief, successful arrangement. Your cloak pin now becomes more important than its size suggests. By daylight, it is a fastening, perhaps plain, perhaps worked with care, a small piece of metal doing ordinary work at the shoulder or throat. Tonight it decides whether the front of the cloak stays closed when the wind lifts the edge. You find it with 2 fingers and press it flat. The metal is cold at first, then warms against your skin. A tiny object becomes a gate with weather on the other side. Someone has wrapped his head entirely in his cloak except for his nose. He has made himself into a mound of wool with a beard attached. This keeps the wind from his ears, but his breath begins dampening the cloth near his mouth. He knows this. Everyone knows this. He does it anyway, because the next 10 minutes matter more than the following hour, and human beings have built whole careers on that principle. You try a smaller version. The cloak comes up over one ear, across the cheek, not over the mouth. Better. The uncovered cheek takes snow. The covered cheek warms. The difference is so sharp that your face feels divided into 2 legal districts, one governed by misery, one by compromise. You turn slightly toward compromise. The hide under your hip shifts away. You catch it with your elbow, too late. The cold board finds you again with the confidence of someone who has been waiting. A slow breath leaves through your nose. You lift just enough to pull the hide back, and in lifting, you lose warmth from under the cloak. The choice is miserable and clear. Move to repair the bedding and let cold in, or stay still and let the plank punish one bone until morning. You move. The cold enters. The hide returns. Nobody wins. But the accounts are updated. A narrow tablet-woven band at the edge of another man's garment brushes your wrist as he shifts. The patterned strip is stiff with damp and oddly cheerful in the dark, a little line of human care caught in the machinery of weather. Tablet weaving is an old technique used for strong decorative bands, borders, straps and trims. Here the decoration has no grand meaning to perform. It simply scratches your wrist while its owner tries to sleep. Beauty, like everyone else aboard, has been assigned practical duty. The ship rolls again, and the shared blanket tightens between you and the unseen man on the far end. For 1 second you are both connected by the same strip of wool and the same irritation. Then he loosens his pull a finger width. It is not generosity exactly. It is an adjustment that prevents a fight. Many forms of kindness at sea arrive disguised as not making things worse. You tuck your hand under your opposite arm. The fingers sting as they warm. The folded sleeve under your cheek has flattened, but not completely. The cloak pin holds. The hide edge stays under the hip for now. The shared blanket covers half your thigh and none of your dignity. Around you, other small fortresses are being built from cloth, skin, rope, stubbornness, and silence. Sleep comes nearer, but not as a soft curtain. It comes as a narrowing of tasks. Keep the pin closed, keep the dry fold inward, keep the hide under the hip, keep the boot where it can be found, keep the face turned away from the worst of the snow. The body accepts these tasks one by one, and between them, in the thin warmth gathered by wool that has already worked all day, you begin to drift without ever fully letting go. The drifting lasts only until the cold beneath you changes from surface to pressure. At first it is just the board being cold. Then it becomes the board insisting. The chill rises through the hide, through the flattened wool, through the damp places you hoped were not touching skin, and settles into the hard point of your hip with the patience of a tax collector who knows exactly where you live. You shift a finger width. The cold follows. You shift again. The chest knocks your back. The shared blanket tightens, and a sleeping man gives a warning grunt from inside his cloak. That grunt has the authority of law. You stop moving. The planks beneath you are doing their proper work. This is the insulting part. They are not failing. They are holding the sea out. Viking ships are built from overlapping planks that flex with the water, a strong and clever construction for a vessel that must move fast, ride rough seas, and sometimes come close to shore. But the same living flexibility that keeps the hull from behaving like a rigid box also means the deck beneath your body never becomes still enough to forget. Each lift of the wave travels through timber and into bone. Cold does not arrive only from the air. That is the mistake a land sleeper makes. Wind and snow are obvious. They touch the face, they sting, they announce themselves. The deeper cold comes from below, from wood that has spent the day drinking spray, from seams darkened by meltwater, from the thin line between your body and the sea moving under it. The ship is not a house floating on water. It is a working skin between you and water, and skins share temperature. A wet groove runs along one board near your thigh. It is narrow enough to ignore until your cloak hem brushes it. Then it becomes a whole event. You pinch the cloth and lift it away, but the lifted edge opens a small passage for air under your knee. Cold enters there, neat and quick. You lower the cloth again, choosing the wet danger over the wind danger, because tonight every solution is only another problem with better manners. A man near the mast has solved this by lying on a coil of rope. Solved is generous. The rope keeps his shoulder off the deck, but it has frozen into hard loops, and he now looks as if he is trying to sleep on a basket of antlers. Still, a little trapped air beneath the body can matter. Folded sailcloth, spare rope, a bundle of clothing, even a flat board raised on another piece of wood can interrupt the cold for a while. The trick is finding anything that is not already claimed by duty, cargo, rank, or someone's sleeping weight. The material record complicates the question of exactly how Viking crews insulated themselves from open decks during severe winter weather. A hull can be measured, a rivet can be counted, wear marks can be studied. But the folded cloak dragged under a sailor's side at midnight does not usually survive to give testimony. Experimental archaeology helps, and replica voyages teach much about wet timber, cold wind, and cramped movement. But one storm, one crew, one bad patch of deck leaves almost no clean evidence. The body supplies the missing archive by aching in all the predictable places. You place your palm flat on the board. It is not smooth. Salt and use have raised the grain in faint ridges. Near a seam, tar or pitch has hardened into a darker line. Your fingers cross it and come away tacky in one spot, rough in another. The board is colder where water has sat, warmer, barely, where another body rested earlier. That trace vanishes under your hand almost at once. Human warmth leaves no lasting claim here. A rivet head or nail point under the cloth presses into the heel of your palm. Metal is a different kind of cold, sharper and more direct. You move away from it slowly so the cloak does not gape open. The movement is so small that no one else would notice. Your hand notices. It has strong opinions about iron in winter. Below the loose deck area, or in the low parts of the hull, water gathers as it always does in a boat that is not being lied about. Spray comes aboard, snow melts. Men bring wetness with them in sleeves, boots, beards, rope, sailcloth. The ship works through the sea, and the sea keeps trying small entrances. A wooden bailer waits nearby for that reason. It is not dramatic, it is not ceremonial. It is a scoop, worn smooth at the rim, and it may be the most honest object on board. The bailer has a plain beauty only fatigue can appreciate. Its hollow is shaped for removing what should not be inside the ship. That is all. No boasting, no ornament needed, though some tools in the Norse world are made with care, even when humble. A sword may earn admiration on land, but in this moment, a carved wooden scoop outranks it. A sword cannot make your sleeping place less slushy. The bailer can, and therefore the bailer has won the argument. Someone nudges it with a boot. The sound is small, a dry wooden scrape under the broader noises of wind and hull. You open one eye. The man does not pick it up yet. He only moves it closer to the low patch where water is collecting. Preparedness can be as sleepy as anything else. He tucks his hand back under his cloak and waits for the water to become worth the effort. Your hip is already worth the effort, but nobody has invented a bailer for bones. The hide under you has stiffened along its outer edge. You can feel the line of it against your thigh, almost like a thin board. Hides can block damp and add insulation, but once wet and cold they become less a comfort than a stubborn material with useful memories. This one still helps. It also curls at one corner and lets the board find you again. You press it down with your elbow, trapping it under your weight. The elbow complains. The hip thanks you. The shoulder complains on behalf of the elbow. Your body is now a small council of dissatisfied officials. The ship drops into a trough, and for half a breath your weight lightens. Cold air slips under the blanket. Then the hull rises, and your body presses down harder than before. The board seems to push back. Not enough to hurt sharply, enough to remind you that wood is not softness. The plank has grain, purpose, and a complete lack of sympathy. A thin smear of snow slides from the inner hull and melts near your boot. You pull the boot back, but space is gone. The barrel at your knees refuses to move. The man beside you refuses to move. The chest behind you has never considered moving. You tuck the boot against the rope instead. The rope is colder than the barrel, but drier than the slush. Another compromise joins the pile. In this cramped lesson, the ship becomes known by pressure points. A ridge behind the shoulder, a raised seam under the hip, a cold metal head near the palm. a hollow where water travels, a chest corner that strikes when the bow lifts, a rope loop that can lift one elbow away from the plank if you accept the bite of frozen fibres. You are not sleeping on a surface. You are learning a map no one draws. The plank beneath your cheek creaks. Not danger, not yet. Just the old sound of timber working. The hull is doing what it was built to do, bending enough, holding enough, carrying enough. It is difficult to resent an object that is saving your life while making you miserable. Difficult, but not impossible. You manage a little resentment anyway, quietly, in the private court of your cloak. The baler scrapes again. This time a hand takes it. Water has gathered enough to become everyone's problem. A man leans forward, scoops from the low place, and throws the dark slush over the side. One stroke, then another. The movement pulls cold air through the shelter and across your back. You tighten the cloak but do not complain. The wet must go somewhere, and away is better than under you. He sets the baler down within reach. It rocks once, then rests against a board seam. The ship rises, the seam presses your hip. Snow taps the shield by your head. Beneath all of it, the cold keeps climbing through plank, hide, cloth and bone, while you lie still enough to save warmth and awake enough to know exactly where the ship is stealing it. The baler comes to rest, but the hand that used it does not. It stays on the rim for a moment, fingers curled over the wood, as if the man has forgotten whether he meant to sleep or work. Then a voice from aft says his name. Not loudly, the wind would only tear a loud word into useless pieces. The name moves forward in short, rough copies, passed from one mouth to the next, until it reaches him under the sagging shelter. He exhales through his nose. That is all the complaint he allows himself. The scoop is pushed aside, the cloak opens, and the warmth he has guarded leaks out around him. He rises from the deck in stages, elbow, knee, boot, hand on chest, shoulder into the cold. For a heartbeat he stands bent under the cloth, still half made of sleep. Then he crawls toward the stern and becomes part of the watch. His empty place beside you is immediately colder. The body leaves a shape behind, and the night fills it quickly. You slide your knee a little toward the gap, not because you want it, but because an open gap under the sailcloth invites wind. The man on your other side shifts too. Between you, the vacancy is narrowed, packed closed with reluctance and damp wool. This is how the night is divided, not by comfort, not by dreams, but by who must remain useful. Some men rest while others steer, bail, tend lines, check the sail, listen for changes in the water, and keep enough wakefulness alive for the ship to continue being a ship instead of a floating accident. Viking vessels use both sail and oar, and that mixed power is one reason they can move through coasts, rivers, crossings, and sudden changes of weather with such reach. But every method asks for human attention. A sail does not manage itself. An oar does not pull itself. A steering oar does not forgive a sleepy hand. The man called to watch steps over a rope and nearly catches his foot. Someone grips the back of his belt until he regains balance. No thanks passes between them. The saved stumble is absorbed into the deck's ordinary business. If every small rescue required ceremony, no one would sleep at all. Near the mast, two men crouch over a line that has gone stiff. They work by touch more than sight. The rope has swollen with damp, then hardened in the cold, and the knot behaves like a carved thing rather than a tied one. One man brings it under his cloak for 3 breaths, warming it against his belly before trying again. It is a ridiculous little workshop, but the knot yields slightly. In winter weather, technique often looks like embarrassment performed efficiently. You close your eyes, but the watch keeps shaping the darkness. A man aft calls one word, another answers. A foot scrapes. A line is hauled a handspan and secured. The steering oar creaks in its fastening. The ship's angle changes just enough for your shoulder to press harder into the chest. Sleep tries to descend, but duty has made steps in it. You drift down one step and are stopped by a sound. Drift down another and are stopped by a name. Historians still argue whether watch rotations on Viking Age ships followed formal patterns during long voyages or changed loosely according to weather, crew size, rank, and immediate need. Later seafaring traditions can tempt the mind into tidy schedules, but earlier northern crews may have organised rest in ways that were practical rather than clock-like. The evidence gives ships, route possibilities, saga scenes, and hard necessity. It does not give a neat tablet saying who froze from which hour to which hour. Tonight, necessity is enough. Someone must be awake, so someone is awake. The next man is called before the first has been gone long enough to seem fair. Fairness is another land animal. At sea, the weather decides how quickly bodies are needed. The second man lifts his head from under a cloak, blinks once, and sits up with the offended dignity of a person summoned from a dream by a leaking roof. His hair has frozen at the ends where breath dampened it. He rubs one eye with the heel of his hand, then stops. Because the hand is wet, and the eye has made its objection clear. A small token passes from the man going off watch to the man replacing him. Not official, not ceremonial, perhaps only a short peg used to clear ice or test a knot. But in this moment, it marks responsibility. The peg moves from one numb hand to another. The man receiving it tucks it between his fingers and crawls toward the line. Such little transfers keep the ship organised without speeches. A watch can be a peg, a glance, a shove, a place left open at the stern. The oars lie close, dark along the inside of the hull. They are still for now, and everyone is grateful, in the private way people are grateful, when a heavy task has not yet been demanded. Under sail, the ship may keep moving if the wind can be managed. But if the wind turns awkward, if the vessel must be brought around, if the shore or current requires it, those oars will require bodies. Rowing in this cold would tear the night open. Hands would leave cloaks, backs would heat, sweat, cool, and stiffen. Sleep would scatter like ash from a disturbed hearth, though there is no hearth here to make the comparison decent. A loose shield rattles at the side. One of the watchmen presses it down with his knee while tying it tighter. The movement is quick, practiced, and irritated. The shield is useful as a windbreak and maddening as a loose board. It has probably received more practical criticism tonight than in any heroic poem ever made for it. Your own watch has not been called, but the body does not trust that. It keeps a portion of itself ready. The hand on the rope remains half awake. The foot stays braced. The mind listens for your name, even while pretending not to. This kind of waiting is not rest. It is rest with a string tied around its ankle. The old sailor near the centre seems to sleep through everything until someone says the wrong name for a line. His eyes open at once. He corrects the word without lifting his head. The correction is quiet and merciless. Then he closes his eyes again. Knowledge aboard does not always stand up. Sometimes it lies under a cloak and still makes everyone more careful. A gust drives snow under the shelter. The men on watch shift the cloth, lowering one corner and tightening a rope through a chest handle. The adjustment steals space from your shoulder. You accept it because the wind on your face lessens. A watchman's hand reaches in, pats along the edge for the tie, finds your sleeve instead, mutters, finds the tie, and pulls. The cloth dips lower. Your world becomes darker and warmer by a very small amount. The man who went aft returns at last. He does not reclaim his old place. Someone has already occupied half of it with a knee and a claim of unconsciousness. He stands crouched for a moment, considering the injustice. Then he folds himself into the smaller gap, bringing with him the stern's cold, a smell of iced rope, and hands that shake once before he hides them under his cloak. His replacement is already outside the shelter, bent toward work. The rotation continues without a centre, without a clean mark where one turn ends and another begins. Men are called, displaced, returned, and folded back into the human heap. The ship borrows them one at a time and gives them back colder. Each absence changes the shelter. Each return brings weather inside. The night becomes a loom of bodies moving in and out, weaving labour through broken sleep. You drift again. A name passes over you and lands elsewhere, not yours. The relief is immediate and ungenerous. The man called groans softly, and you feel sympathy only after the warmth beside you begins to leave. His cloak opens. The cold enters. A boot steps over your ankle. Somewhere aft, the steering oar creaks, and the watch takes another tired body from the deck, while the sea keeps no account of who has already paid. The boot clears your ankle, but the opening it leaves does not close by itself. Wind slides through the gap beneath the shelter and runs along the deck, lifting the edge of a cloak here, worrying a loose strap there, finding every place where cloth has not been pinned, tucked, or trapped under a tired knee. The watchman disappears aft, and those left behind begin repairing the shape of sleep without saying they are doing it. A hand pulls the sailcloth lower. Another hand catches the opposite edge before it flaps free. The cloth has stiffened along one side, so it does not fall softly. It comes down like a reluctant board, shedding small grains of frozen spray onto hair, cheeks, and the back of one exposed hand. The man whose hand receives most of it says nothing for a moment. Then he makes a sound that is not quite a curse, but is clearly studied with curses. You help because the edge is close enough to your fingers. The sailcloth scrapes across your knuckles. It is rough, heavy, damp in one fold, frozen in another, and far too valuable to treat carelessly. A Viking Age sail is not a casual sheet. A large wool sail can represent enormous labour: sheep raised, fleece processed, thread spun, cloth woven, panels joined, seams strengthened, and the whole thing maintained through weather and use. Even if every ship and region differs, the basic fact remains blunt. Sailcloth is wealth that catches wind. Tonight, wealth must become a roof. Not a proper roof, not even a tent really. The cloth is pulled low across a broken line of bodies, chests, shield rims, bundles and rope. One corner is wedged behind a barrel, another is tied through a handle, a third is held down by the weight of a man who would rather be asleep, but has become, by geography, part of the architecture. If he moves too much, snow enters. This gives his suffering a public function, which may or may not improve it. The covering changes the weather without ending it. Direct snow no longer strikes your face with every gust. Instead, it hits the cloth above, gathers, trembles, and sometimes falls through as cold dust when someone shifts too hard. Wind still enters low, spray still sneaks around the edges, but the immediate bite lessens, and after the long, open scrape of the storm, less is nearly a feast. Shields are moved into the new arrangement. One round shield is angled between the hull and a sea chest, its boss pointing inward like a dark eye. Another is laid over a bundle that must not soak through. A third is pushed flat against the inside of the gunwale and braced with a coil of rope. In daylight, shields speak of fighting, display, identity, and danger. In this half-frozen shelter, they become shutters, lids, walls, wedges, and occasionally the thing your elbow hits when you forget where you are. The question of shields along Viking ships is more complicated than the mind first wants. Images of shields lined proudly along the rail are strong in modern imagination, and evidence suggests shields could be displayed or carried in ways that made them visible. Yet scholars continue to disagree about how often those neat rows were kept in place during rough travel, rather than arranged for display, storage, transport, or calmer conditions. A shield that looks impressive beside a peaceful shore may become a nuisance when the sea begins throwing itself aboard. Tonight, loose shields earn their keep one awkward angle at a time. A man reaches across you for the shield by your shoulder. You flatten yourself against the chest as much as possible. The shield passes over your face, close enough that you smell wet leather, old paint, damp wood, and the faint iron scent of the boss. It bumps your cloak pin. Your fingers catch the pin before it twists open. The man notices, pauses just long enough for you to secure it, then moves on. That tiny delay is courtesy. At sea, courtesy often lasts the length of one saved fastening. The shield is set near the opening, where the wind keeps cutting through. It does not fit. Nothing fits. A rope is looped through the grip and tied to a chest handle, then tightened until the shield leans at a useful slant. It leaves a gap near the bottom. Someone stuffs the gap with a folded strip of cloth. The strip immediately begins to darken with damp. A good solution announces its own future failure. Near the mast, the sailcloth edge needs another fastening. A small antler toggle appears from a pouch, passed from one hand to another. It is short, smooth from use, and almost absurdly modest for the importance placed on it. Antler, bone, horn, and wood serve everywhere in northern craft life. Combs, needles, handles, gaming pieces, toggles, pins, little fittings that solve problems too small for glory. The toggle slips through a loop and catches. The cloth holds. No one praises it. Objects that work are allowed to remain anonymous. The shelter sags lower as the last tie is pulled. Your world becomes cloth above, shield beside, chest behind, barrel at the knees, rope against the shoulder, and the uneven heat of bodies pressed into whatever shape remains. The blizzard still exists, but now it has to negotiate. Snow can no longer simply fall into your collar whenever it feels artistic. It must find seams, loose corners, shaken folds, the gap where the shield does not meet the deck. A load of snow gathers on the upper side. You can tell by the way the cloth presses down, slowly at first, then with more confidence. A man underneath lifts his fist and thumps upward. The snow slides off in a heavy whisper and falls somewhere beyond the gunwale. For one breath the sailcloth lifts and the air beneath grows taller. Then it droops again. Everyone's head lowers with it. Shelter teaches posture. Under the cloth, sound thickens. The wind becomes duller, but human noises grow closer. A cough stays trapped above your shoulder. A wet sleeve drags across a chest lid. Someone's teeth click once before he clamps his jaw. The man holding the outer corner breathes through his nose in a slow rhythm, not asleep, because if he sleeps his shoulder drops and the cloth collapses into the face of the person behind him. He is a tent pole with resentment. You shift to relieve one knee and discover that your shoulder has also become useful. The cloth rests lightly against it. If you lower yourself, the fabric will touch the man beside you. If it touches him, melted snow may run down into his collar. You remain slightly lifted. Nobody asked you. The ship simply assigned the task. This is how many jobs appear aboard, not as commands, but as consequences. A small tear in the sailcloth hangs above your brow, patched with stitching that stands proud under the frozen damp. The repair is old enough to have darkened at the edges. It holds, though a few flakes squeeze through when the wind presses hard. You look at that patched place longer than it deserves. Someone once sat with needle or awl, thread or cord, and made the cloth whole enough to work again. Now that repair keeps snow out of your eye by the width of a fingernail. The past is sometimes very specific about where it helps. The man at the outer corner adjusts his position, and the whole shelter shifts. One shield slips lower. A barrel knocks softly. The antler toggle holds. The rope through the chest handle tightens and creaks. Everyone freezes, waiting to see whether the arrangement will fail. It does not. A breath moves through the group. Not relief exactly, more like permission to continue being uncomfortable in the same way. Outside, the storm keeps searching. Inside, the crooked roof and borrowed walls create a dark pocket where sleep may try again. The shelter is ugly, low, damp, crowded, and precious. It is made of things meant for other purposes, held together by tired hands and small fastenings. A shield blocks your shoulder. Sailcloth brushes your hair. Snow presses above. One corner still needs watching, and the man bracing it has begun to sag by degrees, bringing the cloth slowly, closer to your face. The cloth lowers by the width of 2 fingers before the man at the corner catches himself. His shoulder jerks upward. The patched sailcloth lifts from your hair. A few frozen grains slide down the back of your neck anyway, taking the narrow route between collar and skin with impressive confidence. You tuck your chin and do not make a sound, because the man holding the corner has a worse job than you do, and this is no time to become theatrical about a snowflake. The problem now is not only the storm outside, it is the storm your own clothing has trapped inside. Your cloak has been snowed on, breathed into, leaned against, dragged across wet boards, and warmed unevenly by a body that cannot decide whether to work or sleep. The outside is cold and gritty. The inside is warmer but damp in patches. When you move, the cloth slides across your tunic with a slow, wet pull. Not soaked. Soaked would be clearer. This is worse in its own fussy way. Damp enough to cling, not damp enough to justify despair. Wool still helps. That is the annoying mercy of it. Wool fibres can trap air and keep some insulating value, even when moisture enters, which is one reason wool remains so important in cold, maritime and northern settings, long before anyone knows the modern language of fibre science. Viking Age people do not need a laboratory to understand this. They understand it with wrists, shoulders and winter. A wool cloak is not magic. It is a very skilled delay. But delays end. Your cuff has taken spray. The outer threads have stiffened, and when you bend your wrist, the fabric gives a tiny crackle. Inside, the skin is warm enough to feel the wet edge clearly. You pull your hand deeper into the sleeve, making a tunnel for the fingers. For a moment it works. Your fingertips touch the softer inner cloth near your elbow. Then the sleeve twists, and a seam presses against the knuckle. The sleeve has become a narrow room with poor management. A man near your knee rubs something into the edge of his mitten or hand wrapping. He keeps the motion small, hidden beneath the shelter, but the smell escapes. Fat, wax, old animal, a faint sourness warmed by his thumb. He is working grease or tallow into a seam, stingily, because such substances have other uses. Fat can feed, burn, soften leather, seal a small gap, spoil a pouch, or offend the nose. Using it on clothing is a judgment that the clothing has become persuasive. The written sources leave room for disagreement about exactly which waterproofing habits belonged to Viking Age shipboard clothing, and how often sailors treated leather, seams, or wool with oils, waxes, fats, or tarry mixtures in ordinary practice. Later evidence, archaeology, experimental work, and practical comparisons all help, but they do not preserve every cold thumb rubbing grease into a cuff at night. That action is too small for record and too useful to dismiss. The man smells his own hand afterward and makes a face. A quiet laugh answers from behind the shield. The laugh is short, almost dry. Under the low cloth, smell is a shared event. His repair may help his wrist, but now everyone nearby must live briefly inside it. The sea takes much from you, including the illusion that personal maintenance is personal. Your own clothing has its layered logic. A tunic under the cloak, belt at the waist, perhaps linen closer to the skin if your means and packing allowed it, wool above, leather at the feet, maybe a hood or head covering if it has not shifted into uselessness. Each layer has a task until water changes the task. Linen can feel cold when damp. Wool can grow heavy. Leather can stiffen. A belt can press a fold into the ribs until the fold becomes the most important political issue in your life. You loosen the belt one notch. Carefully. Too loose and the small things at your waist may slide. Knife, pouch, comb, fire striker, whetstone, needle case. Whatever useful private world you carry. Too tight, and the buckle or knot digs into your side every time the hull lifts. You choose one notch less misery. The belt settles. Something in the pouch bumps your hip. Better. Not good. Better. Salt has dried in parts of the cloth. It scratches when the fabric moves. The neck opening rubs at the skin below your ear, where sweat from earlier work cooled and left a prickling line. You cannot scratch properly. Your hands are trapped inside sleeves, under cloak, beneath a shelter that lowers whenever someone loses strength. So you press your shoulder against the chest and shift in a small, ugly motion. It helps so little that the itch seems personally insulted. A strip of fur at another man's collar has gone flat with damp. Fur can be warm when dry and sheltered, especially where wind cuts hard, but wet fur loses much of its good temper and becomes heavy, dark, and intimate. He squeezes the edge once, then stops before he presses more water into his tunic. His expression says he has learned something he already knew. Near the edge of the shelter, a patterned band at someone's sleeve catches against a rope fibre. Tablet-woven trim, narrow and strong, can decorate and reinforce clothing edges, straps and borders in northern textile traditions. Here, the band's pattern is almost invisible, just a dark raised line under frost, but its strength matters. It catches hard enough to stop the sleeve from tearing when he pulls away. Decoration has quietly done a job. Nobody thanks it. The man only frees the snag and tucks his wrist in closer. The body heat under the sailcloth makes your back sweat. Not much, but enough. That is the trick winter plays when work, shelter and clothing do not agree. Earlier, hauling cloth and shifting shields warmed you too quickly. Now stillness lets that sweat cool. Dampness gathers in the hollow of the back, then spreads sideways when you lean. The cold from outside and the moisture from inside meet in the tunic and sign a treaty against you. Experienced cold weather people fear sweat for a reason. Warmth made by hard work can turn against the sleeper once the work stops. A man who rows, hauls or bails under heavy layers may feel alive for a few minutes, then cold bites through the damp cloth afterward. The safest state is narrow, warm but not sweating, covered but not smothered, breathing without soaking the wool near the mouth. On this deck, the safe state is mostly theoretical, like a perfect king or a dry boot. A drop forms on the underside of the sailcloth above your hand. It swells in the dark, fed by breath, snowmelt, and the shelter's own poor bargain with warmth. You watch it because there is nothing else to do, and because the drop seems to have chosen you. It hangs. It trembles. It falls directly onto the exposed strip between sleeve and glove. The cold is tiny and complete. Your hand jerks, striking the shield beside you. The shield gives a soft wooden thud. Several heads lift. You whisper a word that is not prayer, though it has sincerity. The heads lower again. The drop has vanished into your cuff. For the next minute, it travels slowly along the skin, as if exploring. A young man across from you pulls his cloak over his mouth again, seeking warmth in his own breath. The older sailor beside him taps the cloth away from his face with 2 fingers. Not harshly, just enough. Wet breath trapped in wool becomes a future punishment. The young man leaves a small gap and looks annoyed to have been saved from his own idea. Instruction often arrives without explanation when everyone is too tired to lecture. Your cloak pin holds. The belt holds. The cuff remains questionable. The greased seam nearby spreads its smell and perhaps its usefulness. The sailcloth above dips, rises, dips again. Around you, clothing is not passive covering. It is a set of negotiations happening against skin. Scratch, cling, seal, leak, warm, chill, bind, loosen, betray, help. You press the inner fold of wool against your chest and trap one pocket of heat before it escapes. The pocket is small, private, temporary. It smells faintly of salt, body, lanolin, and the wooden chest behind you. For a few breaths, it is enough. Then the man at the corner sags again, the roof drops closer, and your damp sleeve touches your ribs with the cold politeness of bad news arriving on time. The bad news at your ribs follows you before you know you are moving. A hand presses your boot, then your shin, then gives the small, hard shove that means, make room and do it before this becomes speech. Someone has been called aft. The cornerman must be relieved, or the steering oar needs another pair of hands, or the steersman has decided one frozen helper is not enough. Reasons aboard do not always come dressed as sentences. Often they arrive as knees. You pull both legs inward. The man climbing past you ducks under the sailcloth, one shoulder scraping the sagging roof. A line catches on his belt. He stops, untangles it by touch, and moves on. When the cloth lifts behind him, the stern shows itself for a moment through snow and dark. A hunched figure braced wide, the long steering oar angled out to starboard, another man crouched beside the fastening, both of them belonging to a colder kingdom. The steering oar is not a wheel, Not a neat little handle from a later ship, not anything that lets a man pretend the sea is distant. It is a large, side-mounted oar or rudder, fixed near the stern, worked by strength, judgment, and hands that cannot afford to become stupid from cold. Viking Age ships use such steering gear on the starboard side, and the word itself echoes into later language. The steerboard side is not a trivia point tonight. It is where the ship's direction is being argued into existence. The man at that oar has more space than you. This would be enviable if the space were not mostly made of exposure. Nobody lies against his shoulder. Nobody shelters his face with a shared cloak. The wind reaches him with fewer negotiations. Spray climbs the blade, runs along the shaft, and freezes where it can. His knees stay bent, not from fear, but because a straight body is a poor instrument on a moving stern. He steers with legs, back, hands, and the kind of attention that leaves no room for self-pity. Status gathers there. Not comfortable status, useful status. The person holding the steering oar may be an owner, a leader, a trusted sailor, or simply the one man aboard whose hands know this work best under these conditions. Wealth matters on land, birth matters, reputation matters. But when a dark wave takes the ship at an ugly angle, the stern becomes wonderfully rude about social theory. The ship listens to skill before it listens to ancestry. The helper who stepped over you reaches the stern bent low. He receives no greeting. The steersman tilts his head toward a lashing where ice has begun to collect around the fitting. The helper takes a short tool from his belt and scrapes carefully. Not hacking, not striking hard. The aim is to free the moving part without damaging what must hold. Ice flakes away in small, dull bits and lands on the deck near his boot. He kicks them aside before they can become another problem. Historians still argue over how specialised the role of steersman was across different Viking Age voyages, because a war crew, a trader's crew, a coastal transport, and a settler ship may not share the same chain of command. Sagas remember proud men at the helm, but sagas also enjoy proud men in general. Archaeology gives the hardware. Practical sailing shows the skill. The exact social temperature around that stern position changes from voyage to voyage. Tonight, the answer is simple enough. The man who can keep the blade right gets obeyed. A gust opens the shelter again and carries the stern's cold under the cloth. It feels different from the cold near the deck. Sharper, fresher, less mixed with breath and wool. You smell iced rope, salt spray, and something scraped from wood. The helper's cloak snaps once before he pins it with his elbow. The steersman does not turn. His face is mostly hidden, but one side of his beard has whitened where breath and spray have frozen in little beads. He wipes his upper lip with the back of his wrist and returns both hands to the oar. There is no grand lantern beside him, no warm pool of light. A flame here would be a troublesome guest, hungry for shelter, dangerous near cloth and rope, useless when the wind turns mean. The stern works by touch, weight, sound, and the blurred shape of water. The steersman feels the pull on the blade. He hears the sailcloth strain. He reads the way the hull lifts, twists, and drops. His eyes look outward, but his hands are listening. A carved wooden piece near the steering gear catches a pale smear of snowlight. It may be a shaped block, a worn fitting, something made for a purpose so ordinary no one gives it a name in the moment. Its edge has been smoothed by use, its hollow holds a line of ice. Many Norse wooden objects balance plain utility with careful shaping, and ships themselves are among the great examples of that habit, practical, strong, and often made with more grace than strictly necessary. Here, that grace is being scraped with a tool by a man whose fingers hurt. The oar kicks. The movement travels forward before your mind has named it. The stern drops, the blade catches harder, and the steersman's shoulders tighten. The helper grabs the shaft with both hands. A low sound runs from the stern through the crew, not a shout, but the bodily noise of many people waking at once. Your hand closes on the rope near your shoulder. The chest bites into your back. The barrel knocks your knee. Under the cloth, Every sleeper becomes a brace. For 3 breaths, the ship's whole length is a single held muscle. Then the pressure changes, the blade steadies, the steersman shifts his weight a handspan, no more, and the hull answers by turning its shoulder differently into the sea. The helper lets go with one hand, still ready. No one cheers. Cheering would be far too expensive and a little premature. Instead, someone near the mast releases a curse that has been waiting politely behind his teeth. A quiet laugh comes from aft. It may be the steersman, it may be the helper. The laugh is small and dry, almost lost in wind. It does not make the danger comic. It proves only that the men at the stern are still men, not frozen fittings. A joke there must be careful. Too much lightness would sound foolish. Too much grimness would make every hand colder. The best stern humour is narrow enough to fit between 2 waves. From where you crouch, the steersman's privilege looks like punishment with authority. He has a clearer place to stand, and therefore no excuse to fold under cloth. He may receive the last swallow from a drink bag, or a better word from the leader, but he also receives the weather first. His hands must remain useful, while yours can hide inside a sleeve. His eyes must stay open, while yours steal darkness. He has the room everyone wanted, and none of the rest that room seemed to promise. The helper finishes clearing the ice and taps the fitting once with the back of his knuckles. The steersman nods, barely. The helper stays near him instead of returning under the shelter. That means the stern still wants him. Your shoulder relaxes only after you notice this, which is not comforting. If the stern keeps 2 men, the sea has not finished asking questions. The sailcloth slips lower again over your head. Someone tugs it down and ties it closer, cutting off most of your view. The stern vanishes behind wool, shield, and breathing bodies, but its work continues through the planks. A correction aft becomes a tilt under your ribs. A pull on the oar becomes pressure against your hip. A man's judgment in the dark becomes the difference between the rope lying quietly under your hand and the rope snapping tight enough to wake everyone. You settle back into the narrow place beside the chest. Your damp sleeve finds your side again. The rope remains in your hand. Aft, the steering oar creaks, then steadies, then creaks once more. The man holding it stands in the storm's open mouth, granted the frozen privilege of staying awake for the rest of you, while every curled body under the sailcloth receives his decisions in wood, water, and the small changing angle of sleep. The angle of sleep changes again after the stern steadies, not enough to let you rest properly, enough for bodies to notice one another more than the ship for a while. A shoulder presses against your shoulder. A knee comes in close to your shin. The man who returned from the edge of the shelter folds himself into the group with his hands hidden under his arms and brings a fresh skin of cold with him. Everyone near him dislikes this. Everyone makes room anyway. There is no fire to turn toward. That absence sits in the middle of the shelter like a missing object. On land, cold has a centre. A hearth, a cook fire, a lamp, a brazier, even a guarded coal under ash. People gather around flame because flame gives the body a direction. Here, aboard a small wooden ship with rope, sailcloth, pitch, wool, loose gear, and wind working from every angle, open flame is not a comfort. It is an accident trying to become famous. Fire belongs to the voyage, but not to this moment. Viking Age travellers need ways to make fire on shore, and fire strikers, flint, tinder, embers, and sheltered cooking places all belong to the wider world of travel, camp, repair, and food. But at sea, in a blizzard, a little flame would need fuel, dryness, shelter, and a deck that does not lurch like a bad-tempered animal. The ship grants none of these. A spark near wool and sailcloth would be less a blessing than a legal dispute with disaster. So the crew uses the older, less glamorous furnace. Other people. This sounds tender only if you are not one of the people. Under the sailcloth, warmth is a transaction conducted through backs, elbows, knees, cloaks, and resigned breathing. Men lean together not because the night has made them poetic, but because distance wastes heat. Your shoulder, which earlier wanted space, now values the rough pressure beside it. The man next to you smells of wet wool, saltfish, and work. He is not delightful. He is warm enough to forgive. The shelter traps the heat badly, which is still better than letting it go. Breath gathers under the cloth and dampens it. Wool softens where it is pressed between bodies. The air grows thicker and less sharp. A drip forms above someone else this time, falls into his hair, and produces a hissed complaint of such quiet sincerity that two men almost laugh. Almost. Laughter opens the chest, and the chest is busy conserving itself. Experts remain cautious about claiming exactly how often crews used enclosed awnings or low shelters while underway in harsh winter weather, because the evidence is uneven and depends on ship type, voyage, and circumstance. Some ships could use coverings. Sailcloth, ropes, shields, and cargo certainly made temporary shelter possible. But the exact shape of one storm night roof leaves little behind except practical logic. If it could be tied down and did not immediately try to kill everyone, someone probably considered it. Heat under that roof behaves badly. It pools near the middle and vanishes at the edges. The man at the outer corner shivers more than the rest because his body is part wall, part crewman. Every time the wind pushes the sailcloth inward, his shoulder takes the pressure. Every time snow piles on the upper side, he lifts one arm and knocks it free. He is not asleep. He is insulation with opinions. A younger sailor tries to slide inward, away from the gap near the shield. He moves slowly, pretending not to move, which fools nobody. His boot nudges your foot. Your foot nudges the barrel. The barrel knocks a chest. The chest answers with a hollow sound. 3 heads lift in the dark, and the young man freezes in the exact position of guilt. After a moment, the older sailor near the centre shifts his own knee by a finger's width. Permission. The young man completes his theft of warmth with great humility. Crowding changes the meaning of the body. Earlier, another person's elbow was an insult. Now it is a draft stopper. A damp back against your arm is unpleasant, but it blocks the cold coming under the cloth. The group becomes a badly fitted wall, each person filling the gap left by another. No one is comfortable. The wall holds anyone. Your own warmth has become a small account to manage. One hand stays inside the sleeve, fingers curled near the elbow. The other rests near the rope, exposed enough to be useful if the ship rolls badly. The exposed hand grows cold first. You switch hands carefully, passing duty from one to the other under the cloak, like a miser moving coins between purses. For several breaths, both hands resent you equally. A man near your back pulls a folded strip of cloth from inside his tunic and pushes it toward the old sailor's wrist. The old sailor does not look at him. He simply takes it and tucks it under the joint where bone has been pressing against wood. This small exchange says a great deal and almost nothing. A crew may tease, shove, curse, and steal blanket space, but it also knows which hands are worth keeping warm. The old sailor can read water, knots, and mistakes before younger men have named them. His wrist is not sentimental, it is useful. The strip of cloth has embroidery or woven edging along one side, now almost hidden by damp. It might once have belonged to a better garment, cut down after wear, promoted or demoted into padding. Cloth in this world rarely lives one life. It becomes clothing, repair, wrapping, bedding, filter, tie, bandage, bundle, and finally, rag. Tonight a pretty edge rests under an old man's wrist while the sea works outside. That is not a symbol. It is good use. A helper from the stern crawls under the shelter for a moment and presses his hands between 2 folded cloaks without asking. His fingers are pale and clumsy. The men whose cloaks receive them tense at the cold, then hold still. The stern has charged him heavily. The group pays a little of the bill. After several breaths, colour returns to his knuckles. He flexes them once, winces, and crawls back out before the borrowed heat can become comfort. The brief opening he leaves behind lets wind slice across the shelter. Everyone tightens. Cloak edges are tucked, knees pull closer. The man beside you leans in until your ribs protest. You lean back because the alternative is colder. This is the whole moral philosophy of the hour. The absence of fire also changes the mind. Without flame, there is no bright thing to watch, no red centre where thoughts can settle. The darkness remains soft-edged and crowded. People become the landmarks, the old sailor's breath, the young man's boot, the corner man's raised shoulder, the stern helper passing in and out with weather on his clothes. Warmth has no glow, it has weight. A small wooden cup is passed inward from the edge, not to drink from now. It had rolled too close to someone's foot and nearly vanished beneath a chest. The cup moves hand to hand until it reaches a safer corner. Even objects are brought inward from danger, protected by the same crowded system that protects fingers and knees. A cup may be plain, but losing it makes the next drink harder, and hardship has enough assistance already. Your shivering changes. It does not stop. It becomes less jagged, more like a tremor stored deep in the muscles. The pressure of the man beside you helps. The cloak over your lap helps. The low roof helps, even while it drips. Nothing solves the cold, several things delay it together. The old sailor gives a small cough and shifts the cloth under his wrist. The young man at the edge has found a place where his shoulder blocks the gap without collapsing into it. The corner man thumps the sailcloth once more, and snow slides away outside with a soft rush. For a moment, under the patched roof, the crew becomes quieter. Not safe, not warm, but less scattered. You lower your chin into the cloak and let the bodies around you become the only fire allowed. No flame, no coals, no hearthstone, no smoke rising into a roof beam, only wet wool, shared breath, guarded hands, the sour little smell of human effort, and enough closeness to keep the night from taking each person separately. The ship moves on through the blizzard, and inside its crooked shelter, warmth passes from shoulder to shoulder with no light at all. The warmth passes shoulder to shoulder until one barrel decides to remind everyone that it is not part of the crew. It shifts with a dull wooden knock against the stop near your knees. Once, then again, harder, as the ship leans and the lashing tightens across it. No one moves at first. Everyone listens. A loose barrel is not only noise, it is a threat with storage inside. A hand reaches over your leg and presses the barrel back. The man doing it keeps his head low beneath the sailcloth, eyes narrowed as if he can shame the object into better behaviour. He cannot. The barrel knocks again. This time 2 men move, and the little human furnace under the shelter breaks apart just enough for cold to enter through the spaces where their bodies were. Cargo has its own weather aboard. It blocks wind, stores value, steals room, bruises shins, and changes the way the ship rides. Viking Age ships carry many different kinds of goods depending on route and purpose. Food, tools, cloth, hides, weapons, timber, iron, soapstone, whetstones, furs, and trade items that might pass through many hands before reaching their final owners. On a night like this, none of those goods feel like tidy entries in a merchant's memory. They feel like hard things tied near your ribs. The barrel is wedged again, this time with a loop of rope and a spare wooden block pushed under its lower edge. The block is not made for this job. That does not matter. It has the correct size and no competing authority. The man tightens the rope through the handle of a chest, then braces one foot against the deck while another pulls. The chest complains with a creak. The rope holds. The barrel stops knocking. For now. The chest behind you has become part of the same arrangement. Earlier it was your backrest and one edge of your sleeping place. Now it is a structural citizen in the republic of not being crushed by cargo. Its handle carries tension from a rope. Its lid presses into your shoulder. Its owner, whoever he is, may dislike this use. He does not dislike it enough to untie the rope. Ownership bends when weight begins to move. Interpretations continue to differ over how confidently modern scholars can reconstruct cargo placement on Viking Age vessels from wrecks, burials, wear patterns, and later written material. A hull can suggest what it could carry. Excavated cargo can reveal certain voyages or losses. Experimental sailing can show how weight affects trim and handling. But the precise midnight arrangement of one barrel, one chest, one bundle of hides, and several resentful sleepers slips away. The ropes do not survive in the right positions. The complaints leave no inscription. Your body, however, reads the layout clearly. The chest at your back means no rolling that way. The barrel at your knees means no straightening the leg. The bundle under the shield means that shield cannot move, even though its lower gap lets wind through. The sack near your boot feels like grain or meal, and everyone treats it with care, because wet food becomes weight, rot, hunger, and accusation. A voyage can be shortened by weather. It can also be shortened by one badly kept sack. The smell of cargo thickens under the low cloth. Saltfish makes itself known first, because saltfish has never waited for an invitation. Beneath it sits damp wood, leather, tarred rope, wet wool, a sour hint from grain or ale, and the faint mineral smell of stone from a box or bundle near the mast. A ship carries trade routes in its odours. You do not need to see the cargo to know that land, farms, workshops, shores and markets have all been pressed into this narrow hull. A small object slides against your boot with a whisper rather than a knock. You trap it before it vanishes under the chest. It is a whetstone, thin, cold, and tied with a cord through one end. Its owner must have loosened it from his belt while sleeping. Such stones are common, useful, and surprisingly far-travelled. Norwegian whetstones, for example, moved widely through Viking Age trade networks. In your hand, it is not a trade network. It is a little grey escapee trying to reach the bilge. You nudge the sleeper beside you. He opens one eye, sees the cord, and closes his fist around the stone without fully waking. His fingers know the loss before his mind does. A knife is only as useful as its edge, and an edge needs care. The whetstone disappears back under his cloak. No thanks comes. His hand tightening around it is thanks enough. Another bundle shifts near the hull, softer than the barrel but heavier than it looked. Hides, perhaps, or folded cloth wrapped in oilskin or another covering. A man leans over it and pushes his shoulder into the load, while someone else draws a rope across. The bundle gives with a damp animal smell. For one strange moment, it feels less like cargo than a sleeping beast being persuaded to stay calm. Then the knot tightens, and the beast becomes property again. Cargo can shelter you from the wind better than a wall if it sits correctly. A row of chests breaks the low draft. A barrel's curve holds the edge of a cloak in place. A bundle of hides against the hull keeps snow from sliding into a gap. Yet the same objects turn dangerous when the ship drops and rolls. They have mass. They have corners. They do not care whether your ankle is beneath them. The ship does not hold goods and people separately. It mixes their fates with rope. A man checks a lashing near your shoulder by touch. He slides his fingers along the cord, finds the knot, pulls once, then again. The knot has swollen hard in the wet, and his fingernails scrape against it without much effect. He uses a small wooden fid or peg to work a little space into the knot before tightening the turn. The tool is plain, almost invisible in his hand. It matters because a knot that cannot be adjusted is not quite a knot anymore. It is a frozen opinion. The adjustment steals more of your room. The new rope crosses close to your shoulder, and you must duck under it if you want to turn your head. The shelter becomes uglier and safer. This is a familiar exchange now. Safety keeps arriving with bad posture. A finer chest near the centre catches a little snowlight along its iron fitting. It is better made than the rougher box behind you, with cleaner joints and perhaps a lock. The man nearest it keeps one arm across the lid while pretending to sleep. Wealth, even in a storm, has body language. A poorer man ties his bundle under his own leg. A richer man rests against a lock. Both understand that loss at sea can be quiet. A pouch slips. A lid opens. A thing rolls into dark water and becomes a memory with a price. Yet the storm levels certain claims. A well-made chest can still become a brace for another man's rope. A valuable barrel can still threaten a common sailor's knee. A poor sleeper's elbow can still protect an expensive bundle from spray. The sea does not abolish rank. It makes rank negotiate with physics. The barrel at your knees stays still through 3 rolls. You count them without meaning to. 1, 2, 3. On the 4th, it gives a faint knock, but the rope catches it before the sound becomes larger. The man who tied it hears this and lets out a satisfied breath. Not pride, confirmation. A solution that holds through 4 rolls is allowed a modest reputation. Snow presses above the sailcloth again. Nobody moves to clear it at first, because everyone is listening to cargo now. Then the cornerman thumps upward with his fist. Snow slides away outside. The cloth lifts. The rope across your shoulder tightens slightly, then relaxes. The chest handle holds. The barrel remains in place. The ship has been repacked by inches in the dark. You settle back into the shape left for you, smaller than before, but safer by a few practical degrees. The chest is wall, anchor, and owner's claim. The barrel is threat and windbreak. The bundle is shelter and weight. The whetstone is back with its sleeping man. The rope above your shoulder is irritating, necessary, and not to be touched unless told. Around you, cargo and crew lie together in one crowded arrangement, each object tied against motion, each body tucked against cold. The whole ship carrying value, inconvenience, and sleep in the same narrow, holdless night. The holdless night does not stay arranged. It never does. The barrel remains obedient, the chest handle keeps its rope, the whetstone stays captured, and then water begins to move when no one wants it. A thin line of slush slides along the seam near your boot, slow and determined, following the lean of the ship as if it has been given instructions. You lift the edge of your cloak before it touches. The motion saves the cloth and opens a gap at your knee. Cold air enters at once. It does not rush, it simply arrives, calm and thorough, and settles against the skin behind the damp wool. You lower the cloak again. The slush continues under it, invisible now, which is worse. The bailer is already being reached for. A hand comes out from beneath the cloak, finds the wooden rim, misses once because the ship drops, then grips it properly. The scoop passes forward through the cramped shelter, over knees, under a rope, beside the barrel that has only recently been disciplined. Each person moves just enough to let it through. No one moves generously. Generosity has no room. Bailing is the ship's most ordinary refusal. Water comes aboard, and hands send it away. That is the whole story, repeated until morning or land or bad luck. Open wooden vessels in northern seas depend on constant attention to water inside the hull. Spray, rain, melting snow, seepage, wet gear, and the dripping of every man who crawls in from the watch. A ship is not dry because it is well made. It is dry enough because people keep arguing with the water. The man at the forward low place leans down with the scoop. His shoulder rises under the sailcloth. He dips, turns, and throws the water over the side, or tries to. The wind catches part of it and returns a cold spray across the shield and into the shelter. A few drops strike your cheek. The man pauses just long enough for everyone to hate him silently. Then he dips again, because the water does not care about social discomfort. A patch of ice has formed where spray keeps landing near a line. Not a shining sheet, not a clean, dramatic danger. It is rough, granular, uneven, and exactly where a hand might reach in the dark. Another man uses a short wooden peg to scrape it away. The peg was not born noble. It may have belonged to a fitting, a fastening, a wedge, some small job now forgotten. Tonight it is promoted into an ice tool. Its career is brief but honourable. The scraping makes a dry little sound beneath the wet work of bailing. Small ice crumbs scatter onto the deck. The man sweeps them away with the side of his hand, then immediately hides the hand under his cloak. He has removed a hazard and created pain in his fingers. The ship accepts both services. The evidence remains frustratingly divided on how often crews endured true sub-zero open-sea blizzards compared with coastal winter storms, later sharpened by memory, storytelling, and saga style. Scandinavian sailors certainly faced brutal cold, rough passages, snow, sleet, and dangerous winter water when travel, trade, raiding, politics, or need forced movement. But the exact weather of one night rarely survives with a neat temperature attached. What survives is the material logic. Open deck, wet timber, wool, rope, spray, ice, and hands that must keep working. The baler's shape matters. A bucket would be clumsy here, tall and awkward in shallow slush, likely to bang knees and spill half its contents when the ship rolls. The low wooden scoop can slide into thin water, lift quickly, and be thrown before the next lurch ruins the attempt. Some Scandinavian boat balers are simple, elegant tools, carved to sit well in the hand. Their humility is almost comic. The object that keeps the ship livable looks like something a child might use near a trough. Except everyone aboard respects it more than pride. The man bailing forward works 3 strokes, then 4. On the 5th, his wrist falters. His fingers have gone stupid with cold. He passes the scoop back without waiting to be praised. Another hand takes it. This is the rhythm, not long heroics but short turns. A man who bails too long grows clumsy. A clumsy man throws water into the ship, drops the scoop, slips, or soaks a sleeve badly enough to make later work harder. The crew has no use for heroic inefficiency. It prefers smaller competence, repeated. Your own turn nearly comes when the scoop pauses near your knee. A hand reaches past you and takes it first. Relief arrives so quickly it feels uncharitable. You let it arrive anyway. The man taking the bailer is younger, broader, and already wet along one sleeve. He crawls toward the low place, muttering something about fish having better houses than men. No one corrects him. Fish do have certain advantages. Slush gathers against the side of the barrel at your knees. You push it away with the edge of your boot, not hard enough to splash, just enough to redirect it toward the man with the scoop. The boot sole slides slightly. Your heart lifts into your throat. The rope near your shoulder catches under your hand. Nothing happens. The boot finds grip again. You become extremely interested in careful movements. The deck is no longer a floor. It is a wet surface with opinions. Leather soles that behaved well on soil or boards ashore become uncertain here, especially when salt water, snow, and freezing air conspire to polish the wrong patch. Viking Age footwear often includes leather turnshoes and other practical forms, stitched and repaired according to region, craft, and means. On this deck, the most important feature of any shoe is whether it stays under you when your body has forgotten how tired it is. The bailing continues. Dip, turn, throw. Scrape ice, shift foot. Hold rope, move the scoop. The storm adds water faster than dignity would prefer, but not faster than the crew can answer for now. That "for now" sits under every action. No one says it. It is built into the pace of the hands. A bead of water runs down the inside of the shield used as a windbreak. It gathers at the lower rim, trembles, then drops onto the folded cloth stuffed beneath it. The cloth darkens. Its job changes from blocking wind to storing cold. Someone notices and pulls it free with 2 fingers, rings it once over the side, then shoves it back into the gap. This is housekeeping at sea. Remove water from one place, throw some away, accept that some remains, continue living. The man with the peg scrapes another ice patch from a rope crossing near the mast. He tests the line afterward, flexing it in his fingers to make sure it still bends. Rope that cannot bend cannot serve properly. Wet fibre, freezing air, salt, and strain make every line less friendly. The ship is held together not only by construction, but by constant little examinations. This knot, that lash, this line, that seam, this place where water gathers again. The bailer comes back toward you, heavier now because the man carrying it has mistimed a throw, and water sloshes in the scoop. He grins once in the dark, embarrassed and exhausted, then leans out and empties it properly. The grin is strange. It appears and vanishes quickly. It says, he knows, that was badly done, do not make a song of it. No one does. Your cuff has found the slush despite your efforts. Cold reaches the wrist again. You pull back, too late. The water slips under the edge and travels along the skin in a thin, deliberate line. You whisper a word into your cloak. It is not educational. The man beside you gives a small breath that might be amusement. Let him have it. Someone must benefit. For a few moments, the baler's rhythm almost lulls you. That is dangerous because the sound means work is still needed. Yet the body will use anything. The scrape, the lift, the throw, the pause. You lean against the chest and let the pattern carry the edge of your mind while keeping your hand near the rope. The deck stays wet. The slush retreats by inches. Ice is knocked from the places where hands must grip. Water comes aboard and water is sent away. The scoop is set down again, closer now, its rim touching the board seam near your hip. It rocks once with the ship, then steadies. No one trusts it to remain unused for long. The man forward wipes his wet wrist against his own cloak and immediately regrets the decision. The peg is tucked into a belt. A rope is tested one last time. Under the low sailcloth, everyone folds back into the space made worse by work and better by work, while the next thin stream of meltwater starts its quiet travel toward the lowest place. The next thin stream reaches the lowest place, but no one lifts the baler yet. The water is still below the level of command. The body notices it. The ship tolerates it. Between those two judgments, someone opens a food bundle. The movement is careful enough to make everyone nearby pay attention. A knot is loosened under a cloak rather than in the open air. A wrapping is folded back only halfway. The smell that comes out is salt, fish, grain, cold fat, and the faint sourness of food that has been stored for travel instead of pleasure. It is not a feast smell. It is a staying alive smell. A strip of dried fish passes first. It is pale, stiff, and stubborn between the fingers. You take the piece offered to you and hold it near your mouth, waiting for the ship to finish dropping before you bite. The first chew is work. The fish resists. Your jaw, already tired from clenching against cold, is asked to become a tool again. Salt wakes the cracked place at the corner of your lip and announces itself like a very small enemy with excellent timing. Preserved fish matters deeply in the northern world. Dried fish, salted fish, and other preserved foods support travel, trade, and winter survival across wide regions where fresh supplies cannot be assumed. Viking Age crews may carry fish, grain products, butter, cheese, dried meat where available, ale, water, and whatever the route, season, wealth, and purpose allow. Tonight, the fact is simple. Food must survive the voyage before it can help you survive the night. The fish softens slowly in the mouth. It does not become tender. It becomes possible. You chew, pause, breathe through the nose, chew again. Around you, other men do the same, and for a while the shelter fills with the quiet animal sound of jaws working through necessity. Nobody speaks much while eating dried fish. It would be like talking during a wrestling match you are losing politely. A wooden bowl follows, held with both hands and kept low. Inside is a thick mash of grain or meal, cold now, dense enough that it clings to itself rather than sloshing. That is a mercy. A thin soup would be mostly an insult in this rolling dark. The bowl moves slowly from person to person. Each takes little. The spoon, when there is one, is not always waiting where needed, so fingers do what fingers have done through most of human history. They become tools, and then complain about it later. You take a small portion. It is bland, slightly sour at the edge, and better than another strip of wind. It sticks briefly to your fingertips before reaching your mouth. You lick the fingers quickly, not from greed, but because wasting food onto a wet deck feels foolish in a way that could haunt a person. A grain clings under one nail. You scrape it with your teeth. Elegance, as established, did not board this ship. Scholars continue to disagree about how often crews could prepare or eat hot food while actually underway in rough conditions, because the answer depends on ship size, weather, distance from shore, cargo, season, and fire safety. Cooking ashore is easy to understand. A campfire on land gives heat, pots, time, and a less treacherous floor. Cooking on a small, open, rolling vessel in a blizzard offers none of these generously, so the meal in your hand is cold, packed, rationed, and practical enough to have survived everyone's disappointment. A lump of butter or hardened fat appears next, wrapped in cloth with more tenderness than any man has shown his own knee tonight. It is not large. It is not shared with ceremony. A thumb scrapes a little onto fish or bread, then the cloth is folded back before snow can touch it. Fat is precious because it carries strength. It helps the body keep warmth longer. It makes dry food less punishing. It also leaves your fingers slick, which is dangerous near rope. So you wipe them on the inside of the cloak, where the stain can become tomorrow's problem. Someone has hard bread, dark and dense, broken from a larger piece with a sound like wood giving up. A corner comes to you. It is dry enough to make the mouth work for it, and solid enough to suggest it could repair a small hole in a wall if pressed. You soften it with a bit of mash and fish salt. Slowly it becomes food rather than equipment. A drink bag passes from the inner side of the shelter. It is handled with care, because spilt drink in this cold is not merely lost comfort. It is wet clothing, frozen boards, and accusation. The liquid inside may be ale, thin and sour, or water tasting of skin, wood, and all the hands that guarded it. Fresh water aboard is carried weight, rationed and protected. Fermented drink can travel better in some circumstances, though no single answer fits every voyage. You take one swallow. It is cold enough to make the teeth ache, and alive enough with sourness to remind the stomach that it has duties. The bag mouth is wiped with a sleeve before it reaches one man and not before another. Standards aboard are flexible, especially once everyone has breathed under the same dripping cloth for hours. A man complains that the drink tastes like old leather. The old sailor says old leather would have more courage. This earns a low sound from two men, almost laughter, cut short by chewing. The quirky treasure of the meal is a little horn spoon tucked into a man's belt. He draws it out carefully, as if removing a needle from cloth, and uses it to take grain from the bowl without wetting the inside of his glove. The spoon is short, dark, and polished where his thumb always rests. Horn, bone, and wood utensils are common enough in the wider material world, but this one has become personal through use. He eats neatly in a place where neatness has almost no audience. That may be why it feels important. A few seeds or dried leaves appear in another palm, guarded against the wind. Perhaps caraway, angelica, or some local flavouring from the broad northern habit of making harsh food more bearable when luck allows. The exact plant is less certain in the dark than the expression on the man's face when he chews it after fish. For one breath, a green, sharp smell cuts through salt and wool. Then it is gone. A tiny luxury can vanish quickly and still do its work. The bowl makes its circuit and returns nearly clean. Someone scrapes the inside with 2 fingers. Someone else catches a crumb from his beard before it falls. The old sailor saves a bit of fat in the folded cloth, smoothing the wrap with his thumb before tucking it away. Even residue may matter later. Food is not only eaten, it is protected, portioned, hidden, stretched, argued over by silence. The stomach begins to warm in a low, delayed way. Not the hands, not the feet. Those remain in their separate winter. But deep in the body, grain and fat open a small, dull fire no flame can show. Your jaw slows. The salt at your lip still stings. The sour drink sits cold behind your ribs and then settles. A muttered word passes before one man eats his last bite. It may be prayer, habit, thanks, bargain, or only something learned at home and repeated when food touches the hand. No one asks. Belief and hunger sit close without needing explanation. The hand lifts food. The mouth accepts. The storm continues making its own argument outside. The bundle is tied again. The knot is pulled tight and tucked beneath a fold, away from snow. The bowl is wiped with a pinch of clean snow, then dried with a cloth that was already losing its claim to dryness. The spoon returns to the belt. The drink bag is passed aft for the men near the steering oar, lighter than before. No one objects. The stern has been paying all night. Your mouth now holds the taste of salt fish, cold grain, fat, sour drink, and the faint green ghost of someone else's seed. It is not pleasant. It is better than emptiness. You find one crumb on the cloak near the pin, and press it to your tongue before the deck can take it. Around you, the food bundle disappears behind a chest, the bailer waits by the seam, and the body, newly paid in small coin, asks for sleep again with unreasonable confidence. The confidence lasts until the ship leans. Not violently, not enough to send anyone flying or break the careful lashings, just enough for your newly fed body to understand, with unpleasant clarity, how near the side of the ship is. The gunwale sits beyond a shield, a rope, a strip of dark deck, and a little moving snow. That is all. A few poor decisions, a sliding boot, a cloak caught under someone else's knee, and the sea would no longer be something outside the hull. It would be around you. Your hand returns to the rope before you decide to move it. The fingers know first. They curl around the wet fibres, not too tightly, because a rope can jerk, and a trapped hand is its own kind of trouble. Thumb outside, palm angled, grip ready to release if the line is needed. The old sailor's lessons travel through other people's habits until they become yours. No one says, "Be careful." The whole deck is already saying it. The side of a Viking ship, especially a long, lean vessel built for speed, rowing, beaching and shallow approaches, is not the high wall a later deep-sea ship might offer. Low freeboard helps with oars, landing and moving in close water, but it also means spray comes aboard easily, and a tired person never feels far from the edge. The same design that lets a crew run the ship up onto a beach can make sleep beside the gunwale feel like lying near an open door in a storm. A man at the outer edge has looped one arm through a line while resting his head forward. He is not asleep in the way a person sleeps in a house. He is held in a shallow place, eyes closed, fingers still alert. Each roll tightens his shoulder, each recovery lets it loosen. The rope has become a second tendon. It keeps him tied to work even while he steals rest from it. Your foot searches for the small peg near the deck. It finds it, slips, then finds it properly. A ridiculous amount of gratitude goes into that peg. It is only a thumb length of wood, set for some practical purpose that was never your comfort. Yet now it gives the edge of your boot a place to stop. At sea, loyalty becomes very local. You trust a peg. You trust a rope. You trust a chest corner. You do not trust the polished patch of frozen deck near your heel. That patch has shown its character. The question of personal safety lines on Viking Age ships is difficult because the ordinary act of gripping a rope leaves almost no trace. Scholars continue to disagree about how closely we can reconstruct foul-weather sleeping habits from ropes, fittings, saga scenes, and later maritime practice. There were ropes everywhere, of course, for sail, cargo, steering, lashings, and countless small tasks. Whether a man intentionally secured himself in a particular way on a particular winter night is harder to prove. Still, a human body in this weather does not wait for proof. It grips what is available. The man who ate too quickly earlier begins to slide in his sleep. His shoulder moves first, then his cloak, then one boot. Slowly, almost politely, he shifts toward the lower side as the ship holds its angle. The man beside him catches the back of his clothing and yanks, not gently. The sleeper jerks awake with both hands searching for nothing, then finds the shield rim, then the rope. His face opens in anger. Then he sees where he is. The anger folds away. He crawls inward without a word. No one laughs. That matters. A dropped cup is funny. A stolen blanket edge is funny if the thief is clumsy. A man sliding toward black water is too near everyone's own private fear to become a joke, while the night still has teeth. The shield he grabbed knocks against the hull, a low wooden note that travels through your side. It used to block wind. Now it has served as a handle. Earlier it might have protected a body from a blade. Tonight it protects a body from becoming an absence. Objects aboard refuse to keep one meaning. The sea keeps reassigning them. Heavy clothing makes the thought worse. Cloak, tunic, belt, boots, damp wool, perhaps a hide edge wrapped around the legs. Everything that keeps you alive on deck would become weight in the water. Nobody needs to describe it. The mind gives only fragments and wisely stops. cloth filling, boots pulling, cold striking the chest, hands trying to find wood in the dark. That is enough. Bedtime history does not need a dramatic picture. The rope under your hand supplies all the education required. A piece of ice along the gunwale is scraped away by the outer man, using the same small peg passed earlier. He works slowly, because a handhold covered in ice is worse than no handhold at all. Ice pretends to be surface. Then it becomes disappearance. The scraped bits fall inward and scatter near your knee. You sweep them away with your sleeve before they melt into another little wet problem. This too is safety, moving crumbs of ice before they become a future slip. Your boot sole has stiffened. The leather bends less easily now, and when you press it against the peg, the whole foot feels less like part of your body than a tool attached badly. Viking Age shoes vary in form, but leather footwear, stitched and repaired, is common in many contexts. Such shoes can serve well on land, in farmyards, markets, workshops and shore paths. On a freezing wet deck, they demand respect. They give no promise that a tired foot will stay where placed. You adjust both feet without lifting them fully. Sliding is safer than stepping. One heel wedges against the barrel, one toe hooks near the peg. The posture twists your knee. The knee objects. The edge of the ship remains close. The knee loses the debate. Forward, a small wooden cup begins to move. It has escaped from wherever someone tucked it after the meal. It slides from behind a chest, taps a shield, spins once, and starts its quiet travel toward the darker side of the deck. A hand shoots out and catches it. Fast. Too fast almost. The man holding it freezes, realizing he has reached toward the edge without bracing first. The cup sits in his fingers, harmless and guilty. He tucks it inside his cloak and presses his other hand to the rope before anyone can comment. No one does. A cup is valuable enough to save. It is not valuable enough to make a man reach badly. The small lesson moves through the shelter without words. Secure the tempting things. Do not let useful objects invite foolish movements. The sea beside the hull cannot be watched clearly. Snow breaks the sight. Spray rises and vanishes. The water appears as sound more than shape, a slap under the boards, a rush along the side, a hollow knock against the hull, a hiss where snow meets black surface. The invisibility is part of the fear. A known wave can be braced for. An unseen one arrives as a change in everyone's spine. The steersman calls from aft. Several bodies lean inward before the meaning of the call reaches them. The crew balances itself by reflex. In a narrow boat, one man's movement becomes another man's problem. 10 men moving badly can make danger. 10 men moving well can help the ship ride an ugly moment. Even half asleep, the crew has begun to breathe with the hull. A rope near your shoulder tightens. Not sharply, but enough. Your hand releases, then grips the safer part beyond the tension. The old sailor's advice saves your fingers from being caught. He does not look at you. He may not even know. Knowledge does not need applause to work. The man who nearly slid inward now sits fully awake, one hand on the shield, one through the rope, cheeks pale under the salt and cold. His pride has taken damage, but his body remains aboard, so the balance is favourable. After a while, he lowers his head again. Not all the way, never all the way. His hand stays where it should. You close your eyes and leave a small guard awake inside the body. The guard is not heroic. It is a hand, a foot, a knot of muscle at the shoulder. The part that knows the peg, the rope, the chest, the barrel, the line beyond which the deck stops and the sea begins. Sleep may come near, but it must pass that guard first. The ship leans again. Your fingers tighten, your foot presses, the chest holds your back. The dark water moves beside the hull, close enough to hear, too close to forget. And in that shallow rest, with the rope damp in your palm and the gunwale waiting beyond the shield, you learn that sleeping aboard is not the opposite of vigilance. It is vigilance reduced to the smallest possible shape. The smallest possible shape of vigilance has a sound. It is not silence. It is a rope creaking once under a hand. It is a man breathing through his nose because his mouth is tucked inside wool. It is the old sailor making a correction with 2 words and no patience. It is the little speech that survives when the night has taken almost everything large from people. A voice near your knee mutters about the cup that nearly escaped. The owner answers without lifting his head. The words are too low to catch, but the tone is clear. The cup is innocent, the deck is guilty, and anyone who disagrees may discuss it with the sea. That is enough conversation for 3 men to feel less alone. In weather like this, speech does not need to be wise. It needs to prove that the person beside you has not slipped entirely into himself. Near the stern, a short call runs forward. 2 men answer with a pull on a line. The call has rhythm because work needs timing. Viking ships under oar depend on coordinated bodies, and even under sail, lines, steering, and sudden adjustments are easier when men move together. A shouted phrase, a repeated sound, a count, a grunt on the same beat. These are not entertainment first. They are tools made of breath. The phrase passes again, shorter this time. The hands pull. The sailcloth above you shifts slightly as tension changes somewhere outside the shelter. Snow slides from its upper side in a soft, heavy rush. The cornerman lifts his shoulder just in time. The cloth does not collapse. He says something rude about the timing of the men aft. One of them answers from beyond the cloth with a remark too muffled to understand, but clearly not an apology. A low hum begins near the centre, where the old sailor has his wrist padded by the scrap of cloth. It is hardly a tune at first, more like a vibration held behind the lips. Then another man adds a fragment of words and loses them. A third comes in at the wrong place. The old sailor stops humming long enough to correct the rhythm, which is an ambitious act for someone who looks half asleep and entirely done with humanity. Songs and verse matter deeply in Norse culture. Poetry can praise a ruler, remember a lineage, insult an enemy, mark a feast, carry memory, and display skill. The skaldic verse preserved in later manuscripts is famously dense and formal, full of patterns that reward trained ears. But the sound under this sailcloth is not polished hall poetry. It is a scrap of working sound, perhaps a rowing habit, perhaps a feast tune reduced by cold, perhaps a line that once had better company. It does not need elegance. It needs to keep breath moving together. Academic opinion still shifts around the problem of how closely later recorded poetry reflects everyday Viking Age oral performance, especially the rougher sounds of shipboard labour, joking, and half-sung endurance. Written texts preserve what people chose, remembered, shaped, and copied. They do not preserve every mutter beneath wet wool. A tired hum in a blizzard leaves no manuscript. It leaves steadier breathing for a few minutes, which is less useful to libraries and more useful to bodies. The hum travels badly, and maybe that is why it works. It does not rise into the storm to be defeated. It stays low, inside the shelter, inside chests. You feel it more than hear it when the man beside you joins on one note. His shoulder vibrates against yours. The sound is too small to call comforting in a grand way. It simply keeps the darkness from being empty. Another voice cuts through it with a warning. Not sharp, necessary. A rope is under someone's knee. The knee moves. The warning ends. No anger remains attached to it. At sea, many sentences are born, do their work, and die at once. Move your hand, duck, hold, wait. Not there, pass it, enough. These are the little laws of the deck, spoken and forgotten before the next wave. A man near the opening mutters a name that could belong to Thor, or to a person at home, or to the weather if the weather has been given a family history. Another makes a small cross beneath his cloak, the motion hidden except for the brief lift of his elbow. This is not strange on a Viking Age deck. The North in this period is religiously mixed and changing. Old Norse gods, household practices, charms, vows, local habits, and Christian words can overlap in the lives of real people, especially through travel, trade, kingship, settlement, and conversion. No one organises the matter neatly for you. A man may wear a hammer pendant and know Christian phrases. Another may curse by an old god and bargain silently with a saint he heard named in a port far from home. A third may trust mostly in the skill of the steersman and still mutter a word before a hard wave strikes. In a blizzard, belief becomes less like a banner and more like a pocket tool. People use what the hand can find. Something taps against a chest. A small pendant, perhaps, freed from under a tunic as its owner shifts. In the dimness, it may be a tiny hammer shape, or only a piece of metal on a thong. Thor's hammer pendants are known from Viking Age contexts, and they can speak to protection, identity, fashion, faith, resistance, belonging, or several things at once. Tonight it speaks mainly by making an annoying little knock until its owner tucks it back under his clothing. The old sailor hears the tap and says one word. The owner stills it. The hum resumes, thinner now. Someone adds a line about a shore, or a woman, or a horse with more sense than its rider. The words are half lost. A man laughs once into his cloak. The laugh makes his shoulders shake and lets in cold, so he stops quickly. Humour here has to be economical. The night charges for every opening. A younger man at the edge begins repeating place names under his breath. He is not singing. He is keeping a coast in his mouth. Headland, skerry, inlet, farm, rivermouth, shoal. The names may belong to another stretch of water entirely, or to the route he hopes lies ahead, but they give order to a world that snow has rubbed almost blank. Sailors often carry geography as memory, not as ink. The look of a cliff, the smell near marshland, the way birds move toward evening, the current beside a known island. When sight fails, spoken places can become a rope inside the mind. You listen to the names and find your own thoughts answering with smaller places. A threshold, a dry bench, a bowl set down indoors, the ordinary irritation of someone snoring near a hearth. The memory does not swell into sadness. The body is too tired for that. It only marks the difference between a place that holds sleepers and a ship that borrows them by the minute. The old sailor stops humming and tells the young man to keep his hand through the rope, not wrapped tight around it. He has said this before, but repetition is cheaper than lost fingers. This time the instruction comes with a comparison involving a trapped fish and a fool who admired knots too much. The young man adjusts his hand. The old sailor closes his eyes. Teaching is finished until the next stupidity appears. A short oath passes between two men near the cargo. If the barrel shifts again, one will kick the block in while the other holds the rope. It is not a formal oath fit for an assembly or hall. It is a practical promise made in the dark around a troublesome object. Still, it binds. Much of shipboard trust is built from these small agreements. You hold this, I move that. You wake me if the line tightens. I pass the drink aft. Nobody lets the cup roll free again. The storm presses. The sailcloth dips. The pendant remains quiet. The place names fade one by one as the young man's voice lowers into breath. The hum becomes a single note, and then only the memory of one. Speech has done what it can. It has corrected hands, steadied work, shared irritation, carried gods and shores through the cold, and made the cramped shelter feel less like cargo. You keep your eyes closed. The words continue after sound leaves them. Hold, shift, shore, rope, not yet. The ship moves beneath you. Aft, someone calls again, and the answer travels forward in a low human chain. Under the patched sailcloth, with the gunwale still close and the rope still damp in your palm, the night is held together not by silence, but by small voices refusing to let the dark be empty. The small voices thin until only the working sounds remain. Rope, wood, breath. The slap of water against the hull. The old sailor's last correction hangs in the body after the words are gone, and your hand stays through the rope, loose enough to live, firm enough to matter. Sleep comes back in a shallow tide. It lifts you away from the deck by almost nothing, then sets you down again when the ship changes its mind. The dark ahead begins to alter. Not brighten, that would be too generous. It becomes less complete, as if someone has rubbed the edge of the night with ash. Snow still blows low, but the flakes show themselves for a moment before vanishing. The sailcloth above you has a pale underside now, not visible exactly, only less black. A beard near your shoulder has turned grey with frost and weak light. A shield boss catches one dull glimmer, then loses it when the ship rolls. Dawn at sea does not arrive like a promise. It arrives like another uncertainty. A man near the opening lifts his head and stares past the shield. He stays still for too long. That is what makes others notice. Not a shout, not a call. Stillness. The crew has become sensitive to it. A still man looking outward can mean a line caught, a wave changing, a bird, a ship, a rock, or only a tired mind seeing what it wants. You open your eyes fully. From your place, the world beyond the shelter appears in strips. The lower curve of sailcloth, a rope dark with ice, the side of the ship, a smear of white air, then black water lifting and falling. The man at the opening leans out a little. His hand stays on the rope, sensible. He peers through the snow, blinks hard, and says one word too low for you to catch. The word travels aft anyway. Hope changes the shelter faster than fear. A shoulder rises. Someone shifts a knee off your cloak. The old sailor opens one eye. The young man at the edge forgets to pretend he is asleep. Nobody asks loudly. Loud questions make fools of people when the answer turns out to be cloud. Viking Age sailors navigate with practical, accumulated knowledge. Coastlines, islands, stars when visible, sun when available, currents, swell, wind, sea colour, birds, and the memory of routes spoken by people who have survived them. The north is full of water that can look almost empty until a trained eye begins filling it with marks. A headland has a shape. A skerry breaks a wave in a certain way. Birds do not fly without business forever. Land can be heard in surf before it is seen, smelled in weed or soil when wind allows, and guessed from how water behaves around hidden stone. This morning gives almost none of that cleanly. Snow breaks the view into lies. A dark shape appears forward, then vanishes. It might be land. It might be a low cloud folded into snow. It might be a wave lifting at the wrong moment and holding its form just long enough to trick several exhausted men. Your mind, greedy for steadiness, chooses land before judgment can stop it. Then the shape disappears, and judgment returns with a tired little shrug. The steersman calls something from aft. The call is not excitement. It is restraint. Hold course. Hold bodies. Do not all crawl to one side like curious children and make the ship regret carrying you. The message arrives not as a lecture, but as a tone. Men settle lower again, though no one fully relaxes. Hope has already entered. It will not be put neatly away. The debate over special Viking navigational aids has become famous in modern retellings, especially the so-called sunstone and possible sun shadow methods. Modern scholarship still has not quite resolved whether such tools were common practice, rare experiments, later literary memory, or partly real techniques filtered through stories. Experiments show possibilities under certain conditions, and the sources tempt imagination, but evidence remains uneven. In this snow-choked dawn, all clever devices would still have to answer the same problem. The world refuses to show its face clearly. A bird would help. Even one dark wing cutting low across the water might pull every eye after it. No bird comes. Only snow, torn sideways. One man claims he saw a wing anyway. Another tells him he saw the end of his own frozen hair and should not promote it to wildlife. The correction is mild. Nobody has enough confidence to be cruel. The old sailor begins speaking place names. Not loudly, not as a chant, more like testing a row of knots with the tongue. A point of rock, a narrow sound, a beach below a farm, a shoal where water turns ugly before the eye understands why. Some names may belong to this coast. Some may belong to memory only. The young man at the edge listens as if the names themselves might build land ahead of the bow. Your own thoughts start making shapes from anything that stays still. A fold of sail becomes a cliff. The shoulder of a crouched man becomes a low hill. A wave crest becomes a roofline, then breaks apart and is only water again. Half-sleep has not entirely left you. It keeps working beside waking sight, adding buildings where there are swells, smoke where there is snow, shore where there is shadow. A smell reaches under the cloth and disappears before you can trust it. Not fish, not wool, something flatter, darker, perhaps weed, wet stone, or the mind inventing earth because it badly wants a floor that does not move. Two men lift their faces at almost the same moment. They smell it too, or they smell each other smelling it, which in a tired crew may be nearly the same thing. The shape appears again. This time it remains after the next wave falls. Low, dark, broken along one edge. Not a wall of land yet, not a safe harbour, not a beach with fire and dry socks waiting like gifts from a sensible god. Just a mark that does not move as water moves. The man at the opening nods once toward the stern. The nod travels through the crew more cleanly than speech. Bodies change. Knees gather under cloaks. Hands find ropes. Someone shifts the food bundle farther from the edge. A shield is pulled inward so it will not block movement if oars are needed. The shelter, which all night has been precious because it kept the storm out, now becomes an obstruction that may need to be lifted quickly. Every object begins changing purpose before anyone touches it. Nobody cheers. Land in rough weather is not comfort yet. It is another set of dangers. Rocks hidden under surf, a wrong approach, shoals, breakers, a lee shore that draws rather than welcomes, strangers if the coast is inhabited, a beach too steep for easy landing. A tired crew knows better than to greet land as if it were a bed. Land is solid, yes. Solid things can break ships. Still, the body believes before strategy does. Your spine lengthens slightly. Your cramped knee asks whether standing might one day happen again. Your hand remains on the rope, but the grip changes from fear of falling to readiness for work. The chest behind you is no longer only shelter. It may need to be shifted. The sailcloth above is no longer only roof. It may need to be folded or hauled. The barrel at your knees is no longer only an enemy of legroom. It must stay secured if the ship turns. The steersman calls again. This time the words move forward with purpose. Men near the mast begin clearing the lines that must run free. The cornerman pushes up against the sailcloth, shaking loose a crust of frozen spray. Snow falls down over his sleeve. He ignores it. The old sailor stops naming places and starts watching hands. You remain curled for one more breath, because warmth is hard to abandon, even when it is poor. The mark ahead fades behind snow, then returns, a little wider, a little darker, or perhaps only more believed. The ship rises toward it, drops, rises again. Around you, men who have spent the night as sleepers, walls, braces and bundles become crew once more by degrees, while the first uncertain shape of land waits beyond the blizzard, asking for every tired hand before it offers any rest. Every tired hand is asked for before land gives anything back. The first task is to open the shelter without letting it become a sail of its own. The cornerman rises from his post with visible difficulty, and the cloth dips once, as if it too has grown stiff from holding the night. A hand catches the edge, another unties the antler toggle. A third works at the rope through the chest handle, fingers slow, nail beds pale, patience nearly gone. The sailcloth lifts. Cold enters with clean authority. The pocket of breath, wool, fish salt, damp leather, and human warmth breaks apart in a single draught. Your face tightens, your eyes water. The ship seems larger at once and less forgiving. All the small walls of the night, shield, chest, shoulder, cloak, barrel, roof, are being dismantled, and beyond them waits the grey open air, snow, sea, and that dark mark ahead which now holds its shape long enough to be called land. You sit up by stages. First the elbow, then the shoulder, then the spine which has become suspicious of ambition. Your hip sends a flat, dull message from the boards where it spent the night losing its argument with timber. One knee opens with a burn. The foot hooked near the peg has to be persuaded back into ordinary use. You do not stand yet. Standing is a larger promise than sitting, and you have learned not to make large promises before checking the deck. Around you, sleep is being converted back into equipment. The cloak comes off the knees and becomes clothing again. The shared blanket is pulled free, shaken once, and folded badly before someone corrects the fold. The shield that blocked wind is moved inward so it will not catch an oar. The chest that served as wall and anchor becomes storage again, though the rope mark remains across its handle. A barrel is checked with 2 hard pushes. It does not move. This earns it a brief restoration of public trust. Viking ships are well known for their shallow draft and beaching ability, qualities that let crews approach coasts, rivers, islands, and landing places that deeper vessels could not use as easily. That fact matters now, in the wrists and knees of men preparing for shore. Landfall is not simply arrival. It is handling the ship into uncertain water, reading surf, avoiding hidden stone, trimming or lowering sail, possibly taking to oars, and making sure cargo does not choose the worst possible moment to become independent. The steersman calls again, rough-voiced from the stern. His words travel forward in pieces. "Ready the lines! Clear that side! Keep the weight centred!" The old sailor repeats the practical parts, because commands are more useful when they arrive twice and with less wind attached. Men answer by moving, not by speaking. A rope is hauled free from beneath a folded cloak. A knot is checked and retied. Someone kicks ice from the base of a thwart. The bailer is set within reach. Not because anyone wants to use it, but because wanting has never been its condition of service. You find the rope in your lap and pass it forward. It slides through your hands, wet and stiff, leaving cold across the palm. The ridges it pressed into your skin during the night are still there, red lines sunk into the flesh. You flex your fingers after letting go. They open slowly, as if each joint must be reminded of its contract. A man takes the rope from you and coils it properly, then recoils it after a look from the old sailor. Even after a blizzard, a bad coil remains a bad coil. The material record complicates the question of exactly how crews recovered after winter storms at sea, how they dried clothing, repaired gear, redistributed cargo, and made cold bodies useful again. Archaeology gives tools, textiles, ships, wear, and traces of maintenance, but not the full mourning sequence after a night like this. Ordinary recovery rarely declares itself. It is too practical. A sleeve is wrung, a knot is freed, a comb tooth breaks. A wet cloak is spread later if there is land and time. History often keeps the crisis and loses the cleanup, though the cleanup is where survival continues. A man beside you proves the point with a comb. He pulls it from a pouch, a small bone or antler piece meant for hair and beard, and uses it to pick frozen beads from the fringe of his cloak. The comb catches. He tugs. One tooth snaps with a tiny sound that somehow feels louder than the storm deserves. He stares at the broken tooth in his palm, with deep, personal offence. After everything, the snow, the watches, the slush, the barrel, the almost land that might have been cloud, this little damage seems to wound him most precisely. He tucks the broken comb away. Of course he does. A damaged tool is not no tool. It has simply become a tool with a complaint. Your own clothes carry the night in layers. The tunic clings where sweat cooled and dried badly. The cloak edge has salt stiffened into it. One cuff is damp inside, frozen rough outside. The belt presses in a place it did not press yesterday. When you swallow, dried fish and sour drink return faintly to the mouth, as if the meal has signed its name on the back of your throat. Your face feels both numb and raw, depending on which part receives attention. The dark land ahead grows more detailed. A low shoulder, a broken edge, white water striking somewhere below it. Not a safe place yet. Not even a clear beach. The crew watches for signs in fragments, the angle of waves, the colour under the surface when snow thins, the pattern of breaking water, the possibility of a lee, the memory of anyone who might know this shore. A tired man wants land to be simple. A sailor knows better. Solid ground can be a knife if met badly. The shelter is folded farther back. Its patched seam passes over your head, the same repair that kept snow from your eye. Now it is only cloth again, heavy, wet, and important. Men shake ice from it in careful jerks. No one lets it drag through the slush. A sail that served as roof may be needed as sail. A roof that saved warmth must not be ruined by gratitude. You rise, finally, not fully upright, but close enough to discover how much of your body has been filed down by the night. The first weight on the foot is uncertain. The boot sole slips a fraction, catches, and holds. You stand with knees bent, one hand on the chest, the other on a rope, learning the deck again from a higher position. The world widens, and the widening is unpleasant at first. More wind, more light, more to do. A bundle of cargo is dragged inward by 2 hand-widths, leaving behind a wet rectangle on the boards where it sheltered the deck. For a moment, that dry-edged mark looks intimate, like the outline of the night itself. Then a boot steps through it, smearing snow across the shape, and it becomes merely deck. The ship has no interest in memorials. The men near the bow prepare as the steersman brings the vessel toward a better angle. Oars may be needed, lines must run, cargo must hold. The younger man who nearly slid in the night now keeps one hand through a rope without being told. His face is pale, rimmed with salt and frost, and older by exactly 1 storm. The old sailor checks him anyway. Habit is not insult. It is how people remain alive after they have already learned something. Land holds ahead. A sound passes through the crew, not a cheer, not yet. More like breath released from several chests at once. The storm has not ended. The shore has not welcomed anyone. But the night has lost its absolute command. There is something fixed beyond the bow now, something that does not rise and drop beneath you. The body understands before the mind trusts it. Your shoulders lower slightly, your jaw unclenches. One hand stays on the rope, but the grip is no longer only fear. It is readiness. The ship moves toward the dark edge with its cargo of wet wool, aching joints, cracked hands, guarded food, broken comb, useful bailer, patient shields, and men who have slept in pieces without ever fully leaving the world. Behind you, the shelter that was a roof becomes a folded weight. Beneath you, the planks still flex with the sea. Ahead, surf flashes white below the land and disappears again behind snow. You hold the line and wait for the next command. The body does not return from such a night all at once. It comes back in small permissions. A finger opens more easily. A knee accepts weight. A shoulder drops from its braced place near the ear. Breath lengthens after hours of being taken in guarded pieces. Even the face softens, though salt still sits at the lips, and cold still works patiently through the sleeve. The night remains in the clothing. It stays in the damp fold of wool under the arm, in the rubbed place where the belt pressed the side, in the palm marked by rope, in the taste of fish and sour drink that has not quite gone. It stays in the memory of the gunwale close by, the peg under the boot, the old sailor's correction, the shield catching wind, the sailcloth roof dipping and lifting over tired heads. But the storm is no longer the only thing present. The shore waits ahead, dark and low and real enough. The ship lifts toward it, settles, lifts again. Around you, men work more quietly now, not because the danger is over, but because the long frozen watch has thinned into morning tasks. Rope is gathered, cloth is held, cargo is checked. A hand reaches, another receives. The ordinary world begins to reassemble itself from cold pieces. Let the deck grow less sharp beneath you. Let the rope loosen in the hand without being lost. Let the wet cloak remain only a cloak, not a wall, not a blanket, not the last small country of warmth. The boards rise and fall, but the land beyond them does not. Snow still crosses the air, softer now, or perhaps only farther from the centre of the mind. The sea keeps speaking against the hull, but its voice has less room inside you. You do not have to name the rocks or choose the landing place. You do not have to hold the steering oar or read the water under the snow. Other hands are doing that in the grey. For this breath, it is enough to stand braced on the planks, to feel the body remember itself, to let the long, cold night loosen one finger at a time. The ship carries you forward, not gently, not elegantly, but faithfully enough. Behind you is the cramped dark under sailcloth. Around you is the slow work of morning. Ahead is land, and with land, perhaps later, the plain kindness of fire where fire belongs, wool spread to dry, boots set near warmth, and sleep that does not require one hand on a rope. For now the line rests in your palm. The shore holds its shape. The storm moves behind the breath. And little by little, the night lets go. Sweet dreams.